I'm sorry. But I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. In this world, there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate. We think too much and feel too little. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness. Without these qualities, life will be violent. And all will be lost. Do not despair. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die. And the power they took from the people will return to the people. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world, to do away with greed. Now let us fight to free the world, to fulfill that promise. Let us all unite.
All right, folks, welcome to the Corporation Nation radio program. I'm your host, Clint Richardson. With me, a very special guest, Dr. Helen Caldicott. Helen, for 42 years now, she has devoted her life to activism, to an international campaign to educate the public about the medical hazards of the nuclear age and the necessary changes in human behavior to stop environmental destruction, a cause after my own heart. Quite a resume for Dr. Caldicott, but she has her medical degree from the University of Adelaide Medical School in 1961. She founded the Cystic Fibrosis Clinic there at the Children's Hospital in 1975 and was an instructor in pediatrics at Harvard Medical School. Oh boy, several organizations, including Physicians for Social Responsibility, for which she was a president, and also their umbrella group, the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War, won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1985. I'll tell you what, her bio goes on and on and on. So I will tell you about her new book that is coming out, Crisis Without End, emanating from the conference proceedings of the most recent symposium, which was Physicians for Social Responsibility at the New York Academy of Medicine, March 2013. Welcome. That'll be out in 2/14. Welcome, Ms. Caldicott, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
Well, realizing that your specialty is obviously in the medical field and not so much in the field of explaining how all this nuclear stuff is working in the Fukishima realm, I have seen many of your presentations. And I'd like you to really, I think a lot of people are looking for answers that can't seem to be found on what's happening over there, what's happening with the Pacific Ocean, and what's happening with the health of people that's being caused by Fukushima, and also of course, the Chernobyl incident, which I believe has been covered up as well.
Mm. So, what you want me? I mean, I can explain the mechanics of the accident and then go on to explain what it means medically to both people in Japan and around the world. Is that what you want me to do?
Please do. Thank you.
Okay. Well, General Electric in the 70s built 6 Mark I GE reactors on or near an earthquake fault in Japan. Of course, the whole of Japan is riven by earthquake faults. I know the 3 GE engineers who designed these reactors, Dick Hubbard, Dale Bryden-Barr, and, I can't think of the other one. And they, in 1975, resigned from GE to say that these reactors were too dangerous and they couldn't go on with working with GE. They then testified before Congress in 1976. Greg Minor was the third one, and talked about how dangerous these reactors were, but of course no one took any notice. Okay, so fast forward to the present time, or to 2 years ago, there was a massive huge earthquake in the ocean, some miles from the Fukishima reactors. It was 9 on the Richter scale. And that not only shook the reactors and destroyed the external power supply upon which they were dependent, but then a huge tsunami came in and totally almost engulfed the first 4 reactors, 1, 2, 3, and 4. The others, 5 and 6, on higher ground. Now, what happened is that when the external power supply was lost because of the earthquake, each reactor needs 1 million gallons a minute to keep it cool of water. And the pump could not operate because the power supply was cut off. So because of that contingency, of course, the engineers had designed a system of diesel reactors, but they were placed beneath the nuclear reactors themselves, diesel generators, I mean, each about the size of a house, huge things. So they were designed to start operating when the power supply was cut off, but then in came the tsunami and drowned the diesel generators. So there was no power to fuel or power the pump, which circulated 1 million gallons of water per minute to each reactor to keep them cool. Within a few hours, the fuel, and each contained about 100 tons or more of uranium, with all the incredibly hot, thermally hot radioactive fission products, of which there are over 200, within each reactor. And the fuel is so hot that unless it's continually cooled, it starts to melt. Temperatures, I think, of 2,600 degrees centigrade, if I'm correct. And within, in fact, 2 or 3 days, the 3 cores in units 1, 2, and 3 melted like lava out of a volcano, and they melted their way through 6 inches of steel down onto the floor of the containment building, which is made of concrete and steel. And there is some thought amongst nuclear engineers that, in fact, one or several have melted their way through that concrete and steel containment floor into the earth. That's called by the nuclear industry the melt through to China syndrome. And there's a film made with Jane Fonda and I can't remember the other actor about a melt through to China syndrome, which happened to come out just after 3 Mile Island melted. Now, as that happened, huge amounts of radiation were emitted into the air because as the fuel melted, the zirconium cladding of the rod, each fuel rod is 12 feet long and half an inch thick, and it's composed of little pellets of uranium like bits of chalk encased in this rod made of zirconium. The zirconium reacted with the water to produce hydrogen. The hydrogen could not escape. The escape valve didn't work. It's one of the flaws of the design of these reactors. And so hydrogen built up in units 1, 2, 3, and 4, and there were 4 massive hydrogen explosions which blew the roof off the reactors. And if you look at the photograph of the Fukushima reactors, you can see they're incredibly damaged, upon which huge amounts of radiation escaped. Now, as it escaped into the air, the wind was blowing from Japan west to east. So in the first couple of days, 80% of that radiation release blew across the Pacific and also over the west coast of America, and indeed right across America and round the globe to Europe. The ambient levels of radiation in Seattle went up 40,000 times above normal, and a lot of radiation was deposited around America in various cities and reconcentrated back in the food. Now, after the wind then changed and blew towards the northwest, it blew over Japan. And although the Japanese government knew where the radiation was going, the plume of radiation, they didn't inform the Japanese people because they didn't want to create panic. What's that music?
Oh, we are going to go to a break.
So thousands fled into plumes of incredibly high radiation.
Yes. All right, well, we'll be back with Helen Caldicott. Stay with us, folks. All right, folks, welcome back. Again, we're with Dr. Helen Caldicott, and actually you can go to her website at helencaldicott.com and read all about it. Like I said, a very impressive resume. A woman after my own heart who actually sort of left her career, so to speak, and became a full-time activist against this horror that we're talking about today, which is the nuclear industry, and specifically Fukishima. So, Helen, can you tell us on a microcosm scale what's happening in Japan, and then maybe expand that out into how that is affecting the Pacific Ocean and basically the entire airstream of the Northern Hemisphere?
Yes, well, about 10 million people now in Japan live in very radioactive areas. What you all should know is that children are 10 to 20 times more sensitive to getting cancer from radiation than adults. Little girls twice as sensitive as little boys. The fetus is thousands of times more sensitive to radiation than adults, and old people are more sensitive than young and the like. And about 2 million children are living in very radioactive areas. In fact, they are not allowed to play outside. They're developing obesity. They have to wear masks all the time. They're eating radioactive food, which is being encouraged by the Japanese government. Japanese government is encouraging farmers in the Fukishima prefecture, where much of the fallout occurred, to grow food again, and the rice contains cesium and other such radioactive elements. Tea grown south of Tokyo, which is a long way from the plant. Green tea contains cesium. The cedar blossoms that were going to come out in the spring were full of cesium-137, which causes brain cancers, muscle cancers, heart attacks, thyroid cancers, diabetes, all sorts of things. And I'm only talking about one element out of several hundred that are made in nuclear power plants.
Did I hear you say that the farmers were still promoting or told to grow food?
The farmers are not the farmers are worried. They know they're growing radioactive food. A lot of farmers have actually committed suicide because they feel so dreadful. The cattle, a lot of the cattle have radiation in them, radioactive silver, radioactive cesium, and all sorts of other elements. And Hillary Clinton signed an agreement with Japan just after the accident that America would keep importing Japanese food. My advice to you in America is do not eat Japanese food, and that's seaweed, fish, rice, miso, and every other sort of food product that is produced in Japan, because you don't know what's radioactive and what is not. You can't taste, smell, or see radiation in your food. And after you eat radioactive food containing cesium or strontium that causes bone cancer and leukemia, or plutonium that causes cancers of the liver, lung, bone marrow, testicular cancer and the like, you can't taste it. And it takes 2 to 80 years for a cancer to develop once you've eaten radioactive food. That's called the latent period of carcinogenesis, or the incubation time for cancer. It's silent. It's a silent killer. Now, so far, 44 children under the age of 18 in the Fukishima prefecture have been diagnosed or are suspected to have thyroid cancer. This is really serious because normally about 1 or 2 in a million children develop thyroid cancer. After Chernobyl, we really didn't see thyroid cancer developing for 4 years. Now, this is within the first 2.5 years, indicating these children got a very high dose of radioactive iodine, which causes thyroid cancer, and cesium, which concentrates in the thyroid. But that also is indicative of the fact that they also received high doses of lots of other elements, and those children and their relatives, 10 million or more, who have inhaled or eaten radioactive food or got a high external dose of gamma radiation, many of them will develop cancer in the future, have deformed babies, and the incidence of genetic disease amongst that population will increase over generations. Fukushima can be compared to Chernobyl, only it's worse. There were 3 meltdowns. Chernobyl only had 1 meltdown, an explosion and fire. A very important report from the New York Academy of Sciences called Chernobyl indicates that probably over 1 million people have now died from Chernobyl. Much of the European landmass is radioactive and will be for hundreds or thousands of years, like 44% of it, or 40%.
And
I don't eat. I
That's
don't
not
eat.
what they're reporting, is
What?
it?
Pardon?
As far as Chernobyl, that's not what they're actually reporting over in the parliaments and everything over there. That's
because they're not going along with the latest data. This data comes from over 5,000 articles that were published in Russian and translated into English. This is the first report where there's on-ground examination by physicians and epidemiologists and the like about what is actually happening. The World Health Organization has a very unholy alliance with the International Atomic Energy Agency, and it's not allowed to examine any atomic accidents unless the IAEA says it can. And it works on calculated guesstimate releases from nuclear accidents, and they guess sort of the dose people get, and it's all calculated doses, and it means absolutely nothing unless you're on the ground looking at people and examining them and working out what diseases they have and what they're dying from. So the parliaments in Europe and your government are dealing with incorrect data, which is promulgated by the nuclear industry. And as a physician, I find that quite immoral.
Oh yeah, absolutely. If you have an agency that, and we're talking about coming from the WHO, right? Where one organization wishes to report something but cannot because it's
correct.
Subordinate to another.
Yep. Subordination. I mean, almost prostitution in a way. I mean, in medicine we take the Hippocratic Oath and we're bound to tell the truth to patients and to practice pure scientific medicine. And for some organization which is kind of responsible for world health to subordinate itself to a nuclear organization is obscene in my mind, because nuclear power and its waste will over generations induce epidemics of cancer, leukemia, genetic disease and deformed babies for the rest of time, from the nuclear waste leaking out and concentrating in food chains forevermore. So we've got a terrible problem on our hands, and more than that, every day about 400 tons of very radioactive water is pouring into the Pacific. The fish are becoming radioactive because the food chain concentrates these elements like cesium and strontium and iodine hundreds of times from the algae to the crustaceans to the little fish to the big fish to us. Already tuna being caught in California containing cesium from Fukishima, but you'll hear the nuclear industry say, well, that's only low dose. You only need to get, a few atoms of cesium in your body concentrating in various organs, irradiating a small volume of cells, mutating genes that control the rate of cell division to give you cancer years later. And so people who talk about low doses of radiation, no dose of radiation is safe.
There's no such
dose
thing.
you receive from a dental X-ray or, walking through those X-ray machines in the airports adds to your risk of getting cancer. It's cumulative. Don't get unnecessary X-rays. Don't walk through X-ray machines. Don't live near a nuclear power plant. Close all your reactors down. Don't eat radioactive food. I could go on.
Well, it seems like a daunting task if this is indeed being spread through the airways, through the waterways, and through the food supply, the chain of supply of food. It sounds like an impossible task. Well, we'll be right back here with Helen. Stay with us.
What you waiting for? We've already stripped you of your liberty, privacy, civil rights, and dignity. You want some more?
Scientists have been battling to understand what this unappealing object is all about. What the object is all about.
Information in the form of energy streams in simultaneously through all of our sensory systems in the form of energy.
Back to the Corporation Nation, folks. We are talking today with Dr. Helen Caldicott. Again, that's HelenCaldicott.com. That's CALDICOTT. Now, there's so many questions I have. Obviously, we're going to be short on time because you're only going to be here for another half an hour. But how much of Europe is actually contaminated from just Chernobyl? And on a scale of magnitude, since it's been so many decades, how much worse is Fukishima, and also with the Pacific Ocean? Is there an actual site or database where people can go to actually get some honest information on what's happening in the Pacific?
Good question. You can go to my other website, HelenCaldicottFoundation.org, where you'll find numerous articles on Fukushima and Chernobyl, number one. Number two, I said about 40% of the European landmass is contaminated with cesium, strontium, americium, plutonium, and many other elements. And I would advise you actually to download the report from the from the New York Academy of Sciences on Chernobyl and read that. You'll find one of the scariest pieces of literature that I've read. There are wild boar running around Germany that are almost so radioactive they glow in the dark, have to be shot and buried in a radioactive waste area. Over 300 farms in Britain have to be closed because their lambs are so full of cesium-137. Babies born who were in utero at the time of the accident in Sweden have lower than normal IQs because the developing brain is very sensitive to radiation and is damaged by radiation. I could go on and on. The food in Turkey is very radioactive. They got a hell of a fallout. You can Google all of this, but you also find articles on my webpage. Now, Fukushima is worse than Chernobyl, if anything could be possible. 3 meltdowns, huge amounts, like 400 tons of water pouring into the Pacific every day since the accident, all highly radioactive. And there's no way this is going to stop because Fukushima was built on an ancient riverbed, and water pours down from the mountains just behind this reactor complex, underneath the reactors. Now, when they were intact, that was all right. But now the cores have melted through, maybe into the earth, but anyway, into very damaged containment buildings, all cracking and leaking. And hundreds of tons of water are pouring over these damaged cores, picking up huge amounts of radioactive elements, and then being discharged into the Pacific as well. They're pumping out about 300 tons of this radioactive water a day and putting it in a huge tank, 3 stories high, which are meant only to last 5 years. They're put together with rubber adhesives and corroded bolts. They're leaking, and these tanks contain huge amounts of water. If there's another earthquake greater than 7 on the Richter scale, these tanks will collapse. They're held together with plastic taping and plastic pipe and duct taping, and the water will also pour into the Pacific. At the same time, there's no way that you can really stop this water ever, and they won't ever be able to get to these molten cores because inside buildings 1, 2, and 3, where the cores are, it's so radioactive, even if they put robots there, they can't, they die because the radiation is so high, let alone humans. They're running out of warm bodies to keep the whole site going, and the Yakuza, which is the Japanese mafia, are bringing in homeless people from the streets of Tokyo and elsewhere, and also mentally retarded people. It's really terrible. Now, on Building 4, which was very, very damaged, the walls are buckling. On top of Building 4 is a huge pool containing over 400 tons of very, very radioactive fuel, much of which were just taken out of Building 4's nuclear reactor just before the accident. The worry is, if there's an earthquake greater than 7, Building 4 will collapse, and down will come the pool, and there will be no cooling water. It will leak out. And 400 tons of radioactive fuel could catch fire, producing 10 times more cesium than was released at Chernobyl or the equivalent of 14,000 Hiroshima bombs. If that happens, people are saying, Tokyo will have to be evacuated. You can't evacuate 35 million people. They're saying it'll be the end of Japan, and also a great public health hazard to people living in the northern hemisphere, because the radiation will circle the globe, but not mix at the equator with the southern hemisphere. Also, the water that's pouring under the reactors consistently has produced almost liquefied mud underneath buildings 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they could, therefore, because they're so fragile, collapse with another earthquake greater than 7, and then God knows what would happen if one of the buildings collapses onto a molten core. So we are in great danger. The Japanese government has not invited foreign corporations to come in and help them. Foreign corporations are reluctant because they don't want to be sued for damage if things go wrong. I mean, this whole capitalist system, which is people making profits, TEPCO, Tokyo Electric Power Company, is trying to save money by not paying people properly, and by, not spending much, because otherwise their shareholders will be upset. And the whole globe is at risk for many years to come from this horrendous accident, which is not over and actually will never be over. And people don't understand that.
That's the worst part of this. Now, I'm almost afraid to ask you if you actually have hope for this situation, or at least give me a percentage of the possible outcome of this, whether it's positive or negative. Obviously, it's always negative, because we're dealing with something that's going to be here a million years.
Yes. Well, what they're doing now is they've reinforced the building 4, and they've put a huge crane on top, and they're now trying to lift out fuel assemblies, each containing about 80 fuel rods, very radioactive, from the pool, putting it in a cask and transferring it to another cooling pool. And that operation is going to take 14 months. Now, there are 2 dangers involved with this. A, it's like pulling cigarettes out of a bent cigarette package. The rods, the racking on which into which the rods are placed has been damaged by the earthquake and the explosion. And so if the rods crack, large amounts of radiation will escape, and the workers will have to evacuate, which is not good for anyone. And the second thing is, if a couple of rods touch each other, or there could be induced a criticality accident where many of the rods or the pool itself could become critical with, a nuclear explosion or the like. So, and also this operation is always performed by computers, because there are millimetres to spare between these assemblies, millimetres, and they mustn't touch each other. But there's no computer. This is the first time it's ever done by hand. There are people, as I described, not really well educated workers operating this whole thing, and at the same time, TEPCO is trying to save money. The whole world's looking on aghast, but no one's helping.
Yeah, it's crazy. What exactly happens when they take a single fuel rod out? Where are they stored? I mean, are they storing them? They can't store them together. They can't throw them in a big bag and toss them over the. I mean, how are they actually storing them once they get out? Okay, so they've got
great big concrete casks. I don't know, weighing 80 tons each or something. And they're putting the fuel assemblies, in which there are 80 very, very thermally hot radioactive rods, into the concrete cask. And I suppose if they put more than one, I haven't asked this, more than one fuel assembly, they'll be separated by racks. I don't know. Then they lift the cask, and it all has to be done underwater, because if it's not, the men will, die from acute radiation illness with their hair falling out, vomiting and bleeding to death. Then the cask is lifted out by the crane, moved to, the cask is closed, lifted out, moved to the ground, I'm not sure, and then it's taken by a truck to another cooling pool, and there are 5 cooling pools in that complex, a common one, and a separate one in units 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's what they're doing. It'll take 14 months. they say, unless it's an accident. What do I think? You want me to give you some hope?
Well,
Actually, at the moment, I'm practicing psychic numbing. I know all the data and the information. I'm trying not to get myself emotionally involved. If there is an accident, then I'll have to get right into it. And oh dear, people are writing to me asking me what to do, and what can I say? Only that you must close all your nuclear power plants down where you live and demand that the international community go in and help.
All right, folks. Well, you're hearing it from the horse's mouth here. We'll be back for our final segment with Dr. Helen Caldicott. Thank you.
Versus just ride. The world is like a ride. You think it's real, it's just a ride. We can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love.
All right, folks, welcome back to Corporation Nation on Republic Broadcasting Network. Well, Doctor, I'd really like to thank you for joining me today. I do have one question. Now, obviously, you're part of a network of folks who are adamantly opposed to nuclear energy. It's a as Einstein put it, it's a hell of a way to boil water to turn a steam turbine. It's kind of a ridiculous notion, really, when you consider that the stuff needs to be stored for up to 1 million years. It's a little silly. My question, I mean, let's just say that you were successful and we were to close down all nuclear power plants, let's say tomorrow. How long would it take, first of all, to cool them enough, and then second of all, to actually clean them up? And what the heck are we going to do with all the waste?
Yeah, well, I've been asking the nuclear industry those questions for 40 years, and they say, trust us, we're scientists, we'll find the answer. And I say, that's like me telling a patient, you've got pancreatic cancer, you'll probably die in 6 months, but trust me, I'm an excellent scientist, and in 20 years I'll find the cure. They haven't found an answer to the storage of radioactive waste isolated from the ecosphere for 1 million years, which is what the EPA demands. And it takes a long time for a reactor to cool down for people to get near it. In fact, it's still radioactive after about 20 or 30 years that robots have to take it apart. People can't get near the incredibly radioactive parts. And then all of that, the reactor itself is radioactive waste, let alone the fuel. And where do you put that? It's just an ongoing, catastrophic, mutagenic, carcinogenic nightmare of the most profound public health implications. You know, we worry about what if there was a rabies case in New York, that would be headlines. But this is really talking about the damage to our DNA, our very, very building blocks of life. And as DNA gets mutated in the testicles and ovaries and the sperm and eggs, so we will increase the incidence of genetic diseases like my specialty, cystic fibrosis, diabetes, mental retardation, dwarfism, phenylketonuria. I mean, there are over 6,000 such diseases. So by increasing the level of radioactivity in the environment and in our testicles and ovaries over time, we will be increasing the incidence of genetic disease and reversing the positive processes of evolution. That really is the most serious issue, as I see it, as a physician and pediatrician very concerned about planetary life.
Well, let me ask you. Now, I know. Gosh, I mean, I don't even know where to start here. I know that potassium iodide can combat radioactive iodide as far as the thyroid cancers, and I'm sure there are better products out there than others. I know a lot of people out to make a buck in that particular industry, but Is there a supplement regimen, foods, specific foods, something you can grow? Is there anything that can stop this form of mutation? I mean, it's like having a little ember in your body that's on fire. Is there anything that can actually prevent this damage, especially for children?
No. The answer is no. And it's very interesting to me as a physician that everyone thinks that, if you get a headache, you take a Tylenol, or if you, or an anti-inflammatory for pain in your knee. There is nothing, I repeat, nothing you can do to protect yourself. Yes, if you know there's a meltdown occurring, if they let you know in time, if you have some inert potassium iodide tablets in your medicine cabinet, and you take one, which blocks the uptake of radioactive iodine in the thyroid gland by 70%, only 70%. Although cesium concentrates in the thyroid as well, and it gives you a little protection, but you can't protect yourself against any of the other isotopes. Cesium is a potassium analog, goes to all these cells in the body, which are all rich in potassium and can cause tumours in every organ. Strontium is a calcium analog, lasts for 600 years, causes bone cancer and leukemia, concentrates in teeth, and the like. I can go on and on. So what is absolutely devastating to me, it always has been, is that there's nothing we can do for people. We can't, if there's a meltdown, what do you do with radioactive patients coming into the emergency room? If you touch them, you become radioactive. But your Federal Emergency Management Agency says you take them down to the basement of the hospital, to the mortuary, and hose them down, and the radiation then enters the sewage system, but you can't get radiation out of their lungs and their gut and their bones, etc. We can't cure patients who've had a very high dose of radiation who die within weeks going bald with their hair falling out and bleeding and vomiting to death. We can't fix that. We can't stop cancers developing. We can't get radioactive elements out of your body. We can give a chelating agency called EDTA, which can take out some plutonium if you have it in the body, but not all of it. But I stress there are over 200 elements made in a nuclear power plant. Nobody knows that, but there are. Some last seconds and some last millions of years. Radioactive iodine-129 has a half-life of 17 million years, so it lasts forever. And that is being found in the Pacific Ocean at the moment. That causes thyroid cancer. I could go on, and people don't understand this. Go to my webpage, HelenCaldicottFoundation.org, read about it. Read my book, Nuclear Power is Not the Answer. And I describe in lay language, like I would talk to a patient, what this is all about, so you will deeply understand it. And knowledge is the source of action. If you understand it, you can debate even President Obama, because he doesn't understand this, and win. You can get on television. You can become stars of stage, screen, and radio. If you're a doctor, wear your white coat and go on television. And I would refer to your great President Jefferson, who once said, an informed democracy will behave in a responsible fashion. Inform yourselves. And then you won't be unnecessarily scared, but you will know what's going on and understand it.
Well, Doctor, I thank you again. Are there any other websites or other resources, books?
Yeah, you can go. There's another very good one called Fairewinds, F-A-I-R-E, wins.com or .org. And that's run by a wonderful nuclear engineer called Arnie Gunderson, who's right up on all that is happening both in nuclear power plants in America but also in Fukishima. He's terrific, and he and I work very closely, I from the medical perspective and he from the nuclear engineering and mechanical perspective.
Oh, boy. Well, you, like myself, must be a hoot at parties.
Well, I've got a sense of humour, too, because I'm Australian, so you've got to be able to laugh or you're going to cry.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I thank you. I hope. One last question, since we've got a little bit of time, just a minute or two. But what is the difference, or what's going to happen? Worst case scenario, compared to the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. I know there's a lot of talk about moving everyone, but that's
a good question. The air in the northern hemisphere, the atmosphere, does not mix at the equator with the air in the southern hemisphere. The two air masses tend to be separate. However, the Pacific Ocean is a very large ocean. Fish can swim everywhere, including down to Australia, and I can look out my window right now and see the Pacific Ocean. And I live in a little fishing village, and I eat lovely fresh fish every day. Who knows? The radiation plume from Fukishima will reach the west coast, the north part of the west coast of Canada and Oregon and Washington in March next year, and California later in the year. The fish, as I explained, they concentrate the radiation, so you don't know what fish you're eating. The EPA and the FDA should be testing your fish right now, routinely. And so you don't guess, you know. The EPA should have air monitors up all around the country, but particularly on the West Coast, where if the accident occurs again, that you need to know what's going on, and they're not monitoring.
Well, I don't think there's a lot of people around here who trust the FDA at this point.
Well, it's your government.
Yes, I know. Oh, yes. Well, thank you again, Doctor. I don't know what to say, honestly, but I thank you for your time, and good luck to us all.
I'm practicing prevention medicine, you see.
Take care.
Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes. Men who despise you, enslave you, tell you what to do, what to think, and what to feel. Who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men, machine men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines, you are men. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful. Let us use that power to make this life a wonderful adventure. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world to do away with greed. A world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Do not despair. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die. And the power they took from the people will return to the people. Let us all unite.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Corporation Nation. Wow, that was what can I say? That was a real downer. Oh, Miss Caldicott was supposed to be with us for 2 hours today, but she had to depart early. So I thought I'd give you my own sort of, well, if you will, a conspiracy thought on this. Something that I'm very disturbed about that seems to be happening right before our eyes in so many different various ways is something called transhumanism. Now, I was looking at this thing and I'm going, what could this all be related to transhumanism? I know we have, Tesla technology that supposedly has the capability of reversing the effects or the process of radiation. We have a lot of different things, but I was really disturbed by this particular document that I found. It's called From Human to Transhuman: Technology and the Reconstruction of the World. Now, the name itself is disturbing enough, but the fact that it's from the Templeton Research Lecture Circuit from Arizona State University, October 22nd, 2007, was a little bit more disturbing because this, of course, is within the university system. by Brad Allenby, Templeton Research Fellow, Lincoln Professor of Ethics and Engineering, Professor of Civil and Environmental Engineering, and Professor of Law. I just remind folks that we do have the chat room at corporationnation.chatango.com. And if you'd like to call into the show, we'll take some calls, and especially if you're interested in this transhuman thing, which I find to be one of the most disturbing trends that is taking place right in front of our face. So let's get into this report a little bit, because here's the part that that I wanted to really go over. It says, again, from human to transhuman, technology and the reconstruction of the world. In 2001, the philosopher Andy Clark published a book entitled Natural-Born Cyborgs, in which he argued that humans had always been cyborgs. In fact, others claim that our major competitive advantage as a species lies in our brain's unique and innate ability to couple the external social, economic, information, and technological systems in such a way as to evolve distributed cognitive networks. He is one of the growing number of scholars arguing not that we will become transhuman, but that we already are. The World Transhumanist Association defines transhumanism as the intellectual and cultural movement that affirms the possibility and desirability of fundamentally improving the human condition through applied reason, especially by developing and making widely available technologies to eliminate aging and to greatly enhance human intellectual, physical, and psychological capabilities. The study of the ramifications, promises, and potential dangers of technology that will enable us to overcome fundamental human limitations, and the related study of the ethical matters involved in developing and using such technologies. Now, of course, when we're talking about transhumanism, a whole host of ways to make people more like machines. Whether that be through the biometric systems that are now being introduced into schools through the Common Core, which will eventually advance to a much more frightening state, the sky's the limit, really, when we're talking about cybernetics, when we're talking about a bunch of really nutty people who wish to enhance themselves in order to advance what they feel is the limitations of God and nature, to become God, to become the builder of men. It's a very frightening thing when we actually look at this for what it is, and considering that the people that really promote this are a lot of the people that are the same psychopaths in government, in the think tanks, in the very organizations that keep government going. But what disturbed me most about this is it goes into radiation and how transhumanism is actually a protector against certain types of radiation. Well, let me just read from the report. Stuart Brand put it in his first Whole Earth catalog in 1968. We are as gods, and might as well get good at it. So far, we fail that test, and we do so for reasons that Heidegger stated succinctly: so long as we do not, through thinking, experience what is, we can never belong to what will be. The flight into tradition, out of a combination of humility and presumption, can bring about nothing in itself other than self-deception and blindness in relation to the historical moment. We, this is unquote, I should say, we are as gods. The pivotal moment this became clear was 1945 in the deserts of New Mexico, when a human sun burst into being for the first time. Keep in mind that nuclear weapons are compared to harnessing the sun, the power of the sun, harnessing the atom. Robert Oppenheimer, standing in the stark shade cast by a nuclear bomb, reacted by saying, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." Note the profound shift in perspective from Vishnu in the Bhagavad Gita, I can never say that right, to a mere mortal in awe, not of what God or nature had visited upon us, but what we had built for ourselves. We have since gotten used to, almost blasé about nuclear winter, almost the way a 2-year-old gets used to a loaded .357 Magnum lying on the floor within easy reach. We are as gods. No. For we have created the power, but not yet the mind. And with accelerating technology, we have little time to waste. Now, it goes on to say, we live in a world, it's basically talking about the anthropogenic Earth. We live in a world that is fundamentally different from anything that we have known in the past. In one sense, we have simply begun to perceive that which thousands of years of human history have created, although the Industrial Revolution undeniably accelerated that process. We'll be back, folks. Stay with us.
The mission was successfully completed. Reality.
Welcome again to this neighborhood. I'd like to show you something. You know what this is? Maybe if I press this button. There are so many things to learn about in this world, and so many people who can help us learn. Did you ever grow anything in the garden of your mind? You can grow ideas in the garden of your mind. It's good to be curious about many things. You can think about things that make believe. All you have to do is think. You can think about things that make believe. All you have to do is think, and they'll grow.
All right, folks, welcome back. I tell you, I've been up since pretty early this morning. I had the distinct pleasure of doing a little pre-recorded interview that's going to air tomorrow that I'm going to highly recommend. It was Mr. Michael Tellinger, who's actually in South Africa, running for president next year in the election against that African National Congress that's so nasty. But also, he has found and been one of the sole investigators and discoverers of over 10 million, possibly closer to 20 million, ruins that are all interconnected. All of them have certain energy frequencies. They all seem to be on top of gold. And, it's a fascinating story. But what he has to say about, his political party is called Ubuntu, the movement, and I got to tell you, it's right up my alley. It's exactly what I've always wanted to say, but have never been able to put it in such such succinct terms. That money not only doesn't exist; it's in fact just bills of exchange. He's gotten the banks to actually admit that they don't deal in money, only basically IOUs and bills of credit and that sort of thing. And he actually created his own what was it? It was a certificate that says I owe you, and he basically told the court that this is a promise to pay, And because the banks and the courts have admitted that they don't actually deal in any kind of currency or money, that they deal in securitization, that if this document is securitized, then the money that's owed is no longer owed. It will nullify the contract. Very, very fascinating man. I hope you could pick that up. If not, we always have the archives. I also want to thank several people, actually, who've been helping me out here by reposting the shows. Corporation Nation Radio Archives.wordpress.com. And a new development. Wonderful girl down in Florida has been putting my shows onto YouTube. So I now have a YouTube channel, which, gosh, I wonder if I can, actually remember the YouTube channel. User, it's CNR. So CNR Archives is the name of the YouTube channel. So there's the video aspect of the show. So I'm very, very pleased and want to thank those folks and everybody who's joined me so far. Hope it's been enlightening. It certainly is, certainly has been for me. I've certainly learned a lot since I've been doing this, and hopefully we'll learn a lot more. So I'm looking at this, whole transhumanism thing, and I'm actually kind of freaked out by it, because it's almost, how do you make the world accept something wholly unnatural? How do you make the people of the world accept this transhumanism? Well, you probably won't unless you either create or fake something so insidiously devastating, such as a nuclear winter. And if you're able to outfit the people with certain gear, certain artificial implants, biometrics, and other possible, receivers that will possibly deflect or stop the mutation, the radiation from happening within your own body, well, not only do you have a product that everybody needs, but you fulfill the crazy, crazy dreams of some of the most psychopathic people in the world. But I wanted to finish reading this little part. It says, it is a world dominated by one species and the activities and products characteristic of that species, from automobiles to cities to the creation of vast new cyberspaces. It is a world where the critical dynamics of major Earth systems, be they atmospheric, biological, or radiative, or for that matter, cultural, economic, or technological, increasingly bear the imprint of the human. I cannot, in short lecture, begin to weave an understanding of the complex adaptive systems that increasingly characterize this anthropogenic planet. But a small set of examples might provide a glimpse of what we have already wrought. And I want you to listen to this, because this is the one thing that actually makes sense to me when I think about all that's happened or supposedly happened with the nuclear industry and the pollution, the radiation that's happened. Every planetary body has a characteristic radiation emissions spectrum. The Earth's spectrum, however, is not just a matter of reflections from clouds emitted infrared radiation and the like. Rather, it includes television and radio broadcasts and leakage from all sorts of technologies. Remember that picture of the Earth from space at night and the electric lights spread over North America, Europe, and Asia. In the Anthropocene, perhaps the most fundamental physical aspect of our planet, its radiation spectrum carries our signature on it. Wow. So, this is reaching, of course, even for me, to say that this sounds very much, if you will, like a conspiracy. I don't know. Perhaps you'd like to weigh in on this. Phone number is 800-313-9443. Someone also sent me a very interesting website here that completely contradicts what we just heard. I'd never really given much thought to it, but I guess it's worth a mention since so many things have been faked in history. A website called big-lies.org. Nuke Lies specifically, www.nukelies.com, suggesting that the entire nuclear field is a hoax. Now, I'm not going to put any stock in that because I haven't researched it, and I can't say one way or the other, and I will just put it out there for your reference. But it is in the chat room. Again, that's corporationnation.chatango.com. I don't know. I look at this transhumanism stuff, and I am very, very concerned, not only because of what it is, but it's so hard to put into words. Folks, we'll be back here in the Corporation Nation.
Derivatives, quantitative easing, trade imbalances, recession, low GDP, nations close to collapsing, and subprime loans, foreclosed homes, and people's taxes spent to bail out too big to fail AAA banks again. Fear levels rising as the US crash seems imminent, having smashed the debt ceiling of 14 trillion despite protests and clashes in Athens streets. The IMF imposed structurally unjust programs in Greece, where in fact the term economy entered our language from the Greek oikonomia, meaning household management. Well, how are we managing? Theories abound, but in practice, does anyone actually know what the hell's even happening? Well, seems we've come to our global auditing, our financial day of reckoning. It's an interesting quandary. Have we invested too much in this enterprise to admit the solution might lie in its very demise? For our real economy is something much broader. It's GDP measured not by our ability to hoard, but our capacity to relearn and earn our place in nature's order, and thus remain on this planet Ark, our Pandora.
All right, folks, welcome back. Well, I'll tell you what. I went to the... I put the link for this transhumanism article in the chat room. It's corporationnation.chatango.com. It's a heck of a read, I got to tell you, and it's just makes me sick. It makes me wince to think that this is the future of humanity, from human to transhumanism, technology, and the reconstruction of the world. I went to the mall. Of all places, I'm so out of place in a mall. I mean, I don't really have any fancy clothes or anything, so I'm out there in my sweats, my dirty jacket, my unshaven, unkempt look that I wear so well lately. But I'm going and I'm looking at everything, and I'm watching the people there, and I'm seeing all these. I don't know what you call them, kiosks and things set up in the mall to attract people's attention. They had these bloody, gory video games, which, of course, is the industry I got out of, representing the new Xbox and the new PlayStation. And, there was a virtual reality setup that they had there for a new type of computer gaming system, and I was watching little kids get on there and put this big, massive face mask on, and it just was an all-around disturbing trip. All so that I could use a gift card to eat. And I had to put up with this. These stores are just horrible. Some of the stuff that I was looking at, I can't believe that we have devolved into the state that we are as consumers. I was literally shocked. I mean, I knew it was bad, and I haven't really gone to a mall, especially on a Saturday night, in a very long time. And I was frankly shocked at the state of humanity. I was literally in awe. And as far as people watching goes, I used to enjoy people watching. And now at this point, I feel like I'm a scientist watching an experiment go horribly wrong, and it's not that enjoyable anymore. Whereas people watching used to be something I quite enjoyed. Oh, I don't know. What do you guys think? We're coming up on Black Friday, which again is like watching a Petri dish get out of hand. Let's take some calls. We got Chris in Las Vegas. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Why, thank you, Clint, and I'm certainly enjoying some of your descriptions of where you're hanging out and the strange things you're doing.
It's, I'll tell you, man, that was one of the strangest times I've had, and I've had some strange times in my life. But, God, yeah, go to a mall, folks. Go see what's happening to your fellow man, if you can call us that anymore.
You may get a skewed perception at the mall. You were speaking about transhumanism a little earlier, and I thought I might share with you that the transhumanism ideology, or ideology, idiots that they are, emanates from the Tavistock Institute. Of course, that was Orwell and Bernays and
sure.
Wells, and of course, our great psychologist, Sigmund Freud. But that actually emanates from Madame Helena Blavatsky's Theosophical or False God Society.
Really? I did not know that.
Indeed, from the Austrian Frankfurt schools of technocracy, or techno-crazies, as I prefer to call them.
Sure.
And Mr. Patrick Wood of the August Forecast and Review at www.augustforecast.com has a very great primer on transhumanism, or changed humans, that would be, at his website. And he just did a 3-hour show with it would be the Roth Show with Carl Teichrieb, Teichrib, and Kaye, Beach, Bach. But the transhumanist philosophy of changing humans comports very well with the eugenicist of Dr. Margaret Singer, who was also at that Tavistock Institute, and I think with Bill Gates' grandfather, or perhaps father. I'm not sure which one was there, but I kind of suspect that Bill Gates is the illegitimate offspring from their procreational activities at the Tavistock Institute together in their illicit sex lives, which gives a fairly good foundation, or at least a plausible perception, that explains his involvement with Mo Satan, or Monsanto, as some prefer, and their genetic mutated crops, foods to change humans, which comports specifically with the ideology that is procreated at the Tavistock and the Theosophical Society Institutes.
Well, and it's a scary thought when you think about just more of the classical Hegelian dialectic. You have the problem, and you of course come out with the solution. It's it's very frightening when you actually think about it, that the only way that we're going to be able to survive, literally, is if in an atmosphere that's created to harm us, is to accept certain forms of technology, certain forms of ritualistic, or what's called xenotransplantation, the transplantation and allotransplantation of other human and animal parts, including the serums, the bloods, the DNA, and everything else, that we're going to possibly be forced to start using, aborted fetal. It's just very disturbing. It's already happening. Medicine is already cannibalism. When you're taking a vaccine, you're taking some form of animal or human DNA into your own body. This is all very, very disturbing and immoral to me, and it's just a thought, perhaps not a far off thought that might be the future, and that it won't be just a choice not to accept technology. It will literally be a choice to accept death.
Well, your previous guest, Dr. Caldicott, I was the very day after Fukushima, I emailed the radiationnetwork.com my perspectives that this was going to be a global catastrophic event, and observed that the emanations from that purported accident, which was truly a fabricated militant attack on the environment completely, when they blew the buildings up and set off the low-level nuclear devices to cause the earthquake that precipitated the tsunami, and of course then they had the explosions, which were likely set off by suitcase nukes inside the building, planted specifically by the security team from Zion. And I kind of regrettably forecast that the jet stream and the oceans would carry the radiation contaminants and poisons around the world. And I'm really regretting that I was so accurate in my prognostications that I was trying to alert people, and I really thought that they were particularly criminally and feloniously malfeasant and not doing anything to take any proactive actions to try to mitigate the effects of the radiation's dissemination before it blew up, like maybe flying in large generators that would have been skid-mounted with large Chinook-type helicopters or other means of flying them in to power those pumps to keep those reactors cool, to prevent the China syndrome-style meltdowns that were particularly caused to bring about this particular environmental disaster that we were looking at.
Well, what do you think? Is it possible that the whole thing is a hoax, that there is no nuclear junk out there, that it's just all a big,
I wish it were so, but I'm feared it may not be.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that would be the case. Stay with us. We'll be back for the final segment of the Corporation Nation.
Space and the earth is your home.
Welcome back to the Corporation Nation. I got some, like I said, I got a really great interview tomorrow with Michael Tellinger. If you're not familiar, look up the name, Tellinger. Fascinating fella. Also on Friday, a gentleman named Walter Graham. We did a pre-recorded interview. Obviously, I'm going to be gone most of the week, but one of the best interviews I think we've done so far was actually Mr. Graham and Mr. Tellinger. So Mr. Graham is from the Fluoride Action Network, and I got to tell you, I thought I knew a lot about fluoride, but this guy really took the cake and went the extra mile. He was actually responsible for ridding Northern Ireland of fluoride, led the campaigns there, and wonderful interview. Also on Wednesday, Lark in Texas, that folks I'm sure are familiar with, is going to be on with his friend Nikki, and we're going to be talking about, well, communitarianism. And the more I look into what Lark talks about, which is a combination of a lot of isms, including transhumanism, the more interested I'm becoming in his work, actually. And you can see it coming into fruition, this communitarianism through so many different techniques. Chris, I'm going to also keep... Chris, are you still on the line, Chris?
Well, of course I am.
All right. Well, I'm going to invite another caller, which would be Fred in Michigan, to join us.
My co-conspirator.
Yes. Welcome, Fred.
Okay.
I hope we can have two on the line at once.
Fantabulous.
How you doing, sir?
Well, please don't call me sir. I should be calling you sir. And you mentioned communitarianism, and I am tweaked to recall a NPR interview with some guy whose name I can't recall. It was back in the summer, and he was very unabashedly and smirkishly joking about what he called podmen, stack and pack.
He called what? I'm sorry?
He called, instead of apartments, he calls them a pod, P-O-D, a podman.
Yes.
Stack and pack is part of the Agenda 21 sustainable development, where they motivate, entice people to relocate to the inner cities. And I've seen that happening here in this locale. And, that's bound to happen because, how better to control people than in a concentrated mass. And speaking of fluoride, Clint, if I'm not mistaken, it was the chemical used to weaponize the waste matter from nuclear power plants into weapons-grade plutonium. The enrichment process.
Fluoride was very much necessary to make the nuclear bomb. Yes, and it's also, more importantly, it was, and that is a conspiracy in and of itself. More importantly, it's just the waste product, the byproduct of the aluminum industry, and of course, who sponsored it to be put in the water supply? But the main metal companies that were making aluminum from Dow, Dow to I can't remember the other ones, the National Aluminum Company or whatever. But yeah, it was it's to listen to this guy tell the story. I'll tell you what, he's the guy that actually interviewed Bryson, the fluoride deception, which again, one of the first interviews I saw on fluoride that got me hooked. But I was really shocked at the amount of information this guy really threw out in this interview. So Friday.
Well, on the positive side, Clint, I got to interject the names David Bloom and John Hutchison. And by the way, when Art Bell, this is probably late 90s, some scientist by the name of Brown shows up on Good Morning America with a demonstration involving nuclear waste and how easily he could transform it with his discovery process within 20 minutes. Almost positive it was 20 minutes. And Art Bell just about, is like, wow, the interview of the century if I can get a hold of this guy, Brown. So I think, and Hutchison was the guy who was on Coast to Coast after the BP event and offered his technology.
Yeah.
As a form of Tesla.
There seems to be a lot of those technologies out there that'll save the world that never seem to see the light of the day. I wonder why that is.
Clint,
David Bloom. David Bloom has
people
that.
don't realize that aluminum and fluoride actually comes from the smelter plants, from the smokestacks, where they smelt the bauxite to get aluminum. And it was a waste product they had to pay to dispose of as a hazardous waste. Yeah. Until they came up with the concocted theory that it would be good for cavities, promoted by another one of the pseudoscience groups, the American Dental Association and the AMA, to purportedly cure cavities, which has nothing to do with whatsoever and doesn't have any effect on the cavity.
Amazing, isn't it? And it stores in your bones. Of course, your teeth are bones. It flies by your teeth at light speed as you're drinking it, and it's always the question I had, even before I knew what it was. I was like, why would I drink this and ingest it if it was for my teeth? It doesn't make sense. So, hey, guys, I'm going to take I appreciate you guys' call. I'm going to take one last call before we have to go, and that is John in New York. Welcome, John.
Clint, hey, Clint, how you doing?
Good.
Good. Hey, I just I know a couple weeks ago you were asking suggestions on other hosts or other guest hosts or guests you may, want on, and I thought of a person, and I was just going to throw it your way and, see if you want me to tell you on air or send you an email about it.
Yeah, your choice, man. Your choice.
Okay, I was going to say Sean David Morton, because he seems to be kind of on the same page as you are. I think, you guys are right there, with the legal aspects. And, he's the one I just want to suggest.
Yeah, why don't you send me an email so I get the name correct, and okay. Definitely. So he's a little nutty, a little crazy, a little...
He's a host on another network, which also plays your guys' network on it, but he's right there with you. He's right on the same level with you. And the other question I was going to ask you is about this genealogy. Now, you were saying pretty much everyone in the entertainment world is basically a bloodline?
Well, according to Stephen Warden Anderson and several other genealogists, the interesting thing about genealogy is that the people who actually do genealogy are generally also it's an honored profession. It's a very old profession. So the people who actually do it are also, part of it. So they list all of their cousins, and you go down the list, and it's just amazing. I mean, I'm shocked to see every single important name, from Elvis to the Nirvana guy to Marilyn Monroe. I mean, anybody you can think of, including today's modern actors. Yeah.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking of people like today's. Me and you are around the same age. I'm thinking of here we got this character Eminem, who was totally against the whole machine. And he may be part of the whole machine,
Well, yeah,
controlled opposition is what I'm thinking.
You don't make it. This is this thing. It's just like acting. You do not go to Hollywood and just strike it rich. You don't become an actor. You're groomed for it. I saw so many people go through there, and like I said, fortunately, I didn't want to be an actor. I wanted to be a sound guy, and that's what I studied, and that's what I got into, and I worked very hard to get where I was, and I knew I could never get any further than I was by the time I quit. So, yeah, it's out there. If you look for the genealogical sources, you'll find Tom Cruise, all the big guys. They're right there in the family. So, yes, well, I hear the final note, so we'll say goodbye for tonight. Again, join me tomorrow. This Michael Tellinger interview, fantastic. And then we'll be back on Wednesday live with Larkin, Texas. Take care, folks.